Hello and welcome to the channel. Today what we're going to talk about is Azure Integration Services, pub/sub messaging for BizTalk developers, part 1. Let's go. So let's talk a little bit about why this episode is important. So naturally inside of BizTalk, pub/sub messaging is an important concept when building loosely coupled BizTalk architectures. This is largely due to the message box and its ability to support pub/sub messaging in that specific architecture. So the question is, how do we go ahead and accomplish this inside of Azure Integration Services? And the answer is really around Azure messaging and more specifically service bus topics. So when we have service bus topics, we can have logic apps or even other systems publish messages to the message bus. And then what we can have is logic apps, or in theory other systems too, being able to consume these messages and then distribute them to downstream applications. And so this video is going to focus on level 100 concepts. So if you're well versed in service bus, then this one might not be for you. But following videos, I will address more advanced topics such as subscription filters, time to live, TTL, sessions, and much more. So let's go ahead, let's dive in. So to help illustrate the differences between BizTalk and Azure Integration Services, I figured I'd come up with a scenario, and I think it's probably fairly realistic in terms of what you might see in the enterprise itself. The process is around employee change. So you have an employee that, say, joins your organization or leaves your organization, and you need to update a series of different systems with that specific information. So you might have a human capital management system or HCM system, such as, say, Workday, and you go ahead and get in a message. And as part of that message that comes through a receive port and receive location, you likely want to do some sort of inbound port mapping. And you're going to map from like an HCM specific message into a canonical message that you'll then go ahead and publish to the message box. Now, this is where the subscription, the sub part of pub/sub comes into place. So we've got some different options in terms of how we subscribe to messages in BizTalk. If we do need an orchestration, we can use a direct bound port on our orchestration to go ahead and process that info. So in this case, maybe we need to go ahead and update an investor relations insiders database if the employee is of a certain level, because they might be considered an insider. We need to go ahead and track it, and we want to do some logic, so maybe we need an orchestration to help from that perspective. Then we might have other systems that need this information as well. So perhaps an enterprise asset management system, such as IBM Maximo, and we want to go ahead and feed this system. Now, we don't really need to do a whole lot of logic around this specific scenario, so we can just go ahead and have a message-only scenario where we create a send port subscription. We then have an outbound port mapping where we can go ahead and take that canonical message that was sent into the message box and then map it out to our specific format for our EAM system. Similarly, we might need to also inform the ERP system for perhaps payroll, and we can do something similar where we have a send port subscription, provide some sort of outbound port mapping. In this case, we'll also include a flat file pipeline, and we could go ahead and send that to our ERP. So that's kind of the example that you've seen in BizTalk. I'm sure if you're a BizTalk developer, this will be quite familiar for you, so I'm not going to show you the demo itself, but this is the scenario we want to go ahead and address. Now, if we think about how Azure Service Bus can help us, so Service Bus is part of the Azure messaging family. It is a service that you can go ahead and provision, and there's a few different, I would call it components or underlying services that are available. Today, we're going to focus on just Service Bus queues and Service Bus topics. Now, it's important to understand the differences between these two, features. And so that's what we'll just talk about here on this slide itself. And more details available in these links. I'll include those in the description. So if we think about a queue, we can have one or many applications that will go ahead and publish a message to a queue. And once it's in a queue, it'll be available to be consumed by a subscriber or a consumer. Now, in this case, it becomes a competing consumer scenario. So if we have multiple services or applications that are interested in this message, only one of them is going to be able to retrieve that message. Now, if this is a redundancy scenario where all of these components are essentially the same, but you've got high availability, then this is a perfect use case for that, where if this service goes down, you still have two others that will help with the processing. So it helps from a load leveling perspective, and then also it helps from an HA, high availability perspective as well. Now, topics are a little bit different. What we want to do here is back to our example where we had three different systems that were interested in the same message: our investor relations, our EAM, and our ERP. What we can use is a topic. Now, a topic will have similar semantics in terms of publishing, right? So a publisher will go ahead and publish through the message broker to a topic. And from there, there's the ability to create subscriptions. And these subscriptions can look for the same message, or we can also apply some rules, including filter expressions. We're going to pause that for next week's video. In this case, what we're going to do is for all of our 3 subscribers, they're all going to get a copy of the same message. And so what we do is we create a subscription for each of these subscribers on the topic itself. And so I'll show you what that looks like on the next slide. But this is how we can really get that fan out type capability where one message coming in can be made available to one or many subscribers. And this helps from a fan out perspective. Now, on top of this, you can still have multiple applications or services that are subscribing to that subscription, and then you get that competing consumer type functionality as well. So you still get your HA as well, but we'll pause that for now. So this is what a solution could look like inside of AIS. So we've got a similar scenario. We've got HCM. In this case, we have a file that's being written out. We'll go ahead and take that HCM specific file and transform it into a canonical message. And then we'll use the service bus connector to go ahead and publish on our topic. And so I've called my topic contoso.hcm.person. And then what I've done is gone ahead and created subscriptions for each of our different services. So we've got Enterprise Asset Management, EAM. So I create a subscription called contoso.hcm.person.eam. And then I have a logic app that's using the service bus connector and a service bus trigger to go ahead and consume that message. Now, for the purpose of this demo, we're not going to worry about like the downstream processing. We'll probably address that in a future video, but we wanted to focus more so on PubSub for this video. Now we'll do something similar for our ERP system. We'll create a subscription called contoso.hcm.person.erp, and then similarly for investor relations, contoso.hcm.person.investor relations. And here we'll have logic apps that are subscribing to the topic itself. So here's where there is a little bit of a difference between the message box. There's not a concept today called, a send port subscription. So we are using a logic app for both orchestration, but also for any of additional processing if we wanted to do that. So that's where things are a little bit different in that regard. So let's go ahead. I will show you a live demo of how we can go ahead and address this inside of Azure Integration Services. Okay, so we're going to start with Service Bus. And what I've done here is created a Service Bus namespace. You can just go ahead and type Service Bus in the search bar, and then it's quite straightforward to go ahead and provision a namespace. And I'm using the standard pricing tier here, so that's sufficient for what we're going to discuss in today's video. Now we've got entities, we've got queues and topics as discussed. What I've done is I've gone ahead and created a topic. So here's that topic that I created. You can just simply click on the topic button here, provided a name. Then you can deal with some of these advanced settings about the size of the topic, time to live, sessions, etc. So we'll talk about those details in a later video. So here we've got my contoso.hcm.person topic. Let's go and click into that. And now what we need to do is to create some subscriptions. And so these represent the consumers that would be interested in the messaging itself. So I talked about in the slides, I had created these 3. I've got another one here called add. We'll deal with that in an upcoming video. That has to do with more of our topics, our filter expressions. So for each of these subscriptions, I can just go ahead and click The button, provide a name, just provide a delivery count. Obviously, this will vary based on your scenario. And then we've got more advanced features that we'll talk about a little bit later, but we don't need to worry about that for just right now. And so what will happen here is if we go ahead and look at our EAM subscription, we've got a default filter of basically it's all. So any messages that are sent to this specific topic, this subscription will go ahead and pull. And so what's important to understand is for each of your consumers, you want to provide a subscription for them. Otherwise, you'll get into more of a competing consumer type scenario itself. So that's the service bus piece. Now let's take a look at Logic App. So let's start with the publisher. So I've got the file connector. Now this is going to be an Azure connector. I'm using the on-premise data gateway. We don't quite have that yet as a built-in operation. I am using Logic App Standard. All of this stuff should work similarly with consumption as well if you're on that SKU. So here what I'm going to do is just look for when a file has been created. Ignore this piece here, that's not overly relevant. Once again, I'll talk about this in an upcoming video. We'll then go ahead and get the file content, and here we're going to just use the list of files ID, and then what we're going to go ahead and do is a transformation. So we're just going to transfer from the HCM specific format into our employee change XML. So if you saw the video last week, I talk about transform inside of standard. Not overly pertinent for this video, but if you're interested, go ahead and check out last week's video on that. Then what we're going to go ahead and do is publish this canonical message to our topic. So here you can see that we're going to send it to consoso.hcm.person. We're not sending it to a specific subscription. We're sending it to the topic itself. So that was that higher level entity here where we've got a topic and then we've got subscriptions. So we're going to send it to the topic. Service bus will take care of figuring out who's interested in subscribing to these types of messages. So that's how we're going to go ahead and publish the message. Now I've got 3 different consumers. Now these are all going to follow the same pattern. Once again, not focusing on intricate details here, focused on pub sub capabilities. So we've got a service bus trigger. This is going to be the built-in one that I've decided to use. We provide our topic name. So this is that top level entity, contoso.hcm.person. And then since we're dealing with enterprise asset management, EAM, we're going to go ahead and provide that subscription name of EAM. And so this allows us to pull from that specific subscription. Here, all I'm going to do is just display the content in my compose action. So ERP is going to be exactly the same, with the exception that our subscription name is going to be .erp. And if we flip over to the investor relations, similar concept, our subscription name will be investor relations. Otherwise the same, we'll just use the compose action as well. Now, one thing that's kind of interesting about Service Bus, like it is durable messaging. And so what that means is if you have a subscriber or consumer that goes offline, that message should be persisted and we should not lose it or drop it. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to disable this specific Logic app and we'll leave the other 2 enabled. And so the behavior, what we should see is that the ERP and the EAM Logic apps should be able to consume a message in real time. And what we'll see is that the investor relations subscription will still have a message sitting idle until we go ahead and enable that Logic app. And so that's a pretty important feature as well, just in messaging scenarios. So it's kind of like almost the equivalent inside of the BizTalk message box where you say have a send port and you leave the send port enlisted, not stopped. If you stop it, there won't be a subscription and that message will disappear. But if you leave it enlisted, the message will essentially queue up per se inside of the BizTalk message box. So let's go ahead and let's run this. Now I have a file here. I'm just going to go ahead and perform a save as, and that should trigger a new file creation in the folder, and we should see our Logic app go ahead and pick this up. Our publish Logic app, that is. Okay, so we can see at 12:13 that it has been picked up. Let's just go ahead and take a look at the run history here. Okay, so run history, we picked up our file. We got the file content. Here we can see we've got our XML message. We go ahead, we transform it. So we've got sort of the new format, our canonical message. Then we go ahead and we put that on the wire. We send that to Service Bus. Now, if we head over to our EAM logic app, let's just go ahead and refresh this. You can see at 12:13, we went ahead and picked up a message off of this topic through our subscription. And we can see that we've got the details here. Now we'll head over to our ERP consume logic app. Let's go ahead, let's refresh. 12:13. So that looks pretty good. And once again, we've got our payload, the exact same payload that the other logic app received. Then let's flip over to investor relations. Now, if we refresh this, we should not see a new instance because this is currently disabled. So if we head back over to our Service Bus page here, and let's just do a refresh, what we see now is that EAM and ERP, there's no messages currently available in those subscriptions. But we do see that we've got one here for investor relations, and that's because that logic app is disabled. So let's go ahead, let's enable this logic app, and then we should see that message being picked up pretty quickly. And as a result, when we flip back to Service Bus, we should see that that subscription has no active messages within its subscription. Okay, so we can see it's 12:15 now, and we've gone ahead and pulled this message out of that subscription, and here we have access to the payload. So let's just flip back over to Service Bus, and let's refresh this page. And we can see now that that message has been processed. All right, so that concludes the demo. Hopefully for people that are new to Service Bus and new to Azure Integration Services that have experience with BizTalk, this helped provide a bit of a mental model to associate similar concepts, but how you would solve them using AIS. I'm going to do more videos around this specific topic because I think it's pretty important as customers think about how to move from BizTalk architectures over to Azure Integration Services. So thanks for checking this out. And if there's things you want to see specifically around this, please add that to the comments. So yeah, thanks for checking out this video. If you're not following me on Twitter, go ahead and find me at Weare. Like, subscribes, comments, always welcome. Go ahead and provide those in the channel. Thanks again, and we'll catch you next week. Bye.